I responding to those emails.
Just don't.
Yeah, they're just
You're just wasting your time.
it's just like, okay, this is so pointless.
But yeah, that's funny. It's like literally related. We were just
All right. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. I don't know. I'll take a look at this after class, man. Somebody really likes that. Someone really likes diagonal. But so inshallah, we're going to talk about the exposition of the reality of anger. Last time we had mentioned a series of narrations and a series of statements on the problem with anger. And what are some of the conclusions that we came to when it came to anger itself? And let me just ask some questions to help lead the discussion a little bit. Is anger problematic? If it is, what are those issues and what are those problems? When and where is accountability when it comes to issues of anger? So I want to hear some of your guys' thoughts on what it is that you remember. Yes.
Anger is not problematic per se because it's an emotion, it's a feeling, and
Good.
we're a human being.
Uh-huh.
The problem comes how we channel it.
MashaAllah.
And if we cannot control it. And in some cases, anger is actually a good feeling.
Yeah, absolutely.
When you're doing, for example, self-defense or trying to uphold justice or something like that.
No, for sure. Or like that protective jealousy, right, is one of the elements and one of the things that we had actually spoken about. Okay. Yeah. So it was one of the things that we had started speaking about. Anger in itself is benign, right? It's not anger is good or bad. It's on how the anger is channeled, right? How the anger is channeled, how the anger is used. There are good situations that we had come up with anger. There are bad situations that we had come up with anger. Like protective jealousy, we said is something that is good. Is it possible that that protective jealousy goes too far? Yes. Yeah, right? So what happens? Okay, it can. I'm sorry. It can lead to violence, right? It could lead to violence, or it could lead to preventing your spouse to leave, or constantly throwing something in your spouse's face, like, oh, you were with so and so, oh, you were spending time with so and so, or this was going on, right? So this can actually lead to a series of problems, which is why it's important to understand moderation, and it's important to have control in these things.
Would that be an example of the suspicion that's
Absolutely, right? So this,
Obsessive.
So the type of suspicion that leads to spying, right? So it is a type of obsession for sure, but it leads you to constantly just kind of hound the person and to follow them. And not just that, we have to realize that everybody's an individual, right? Everybody's an individual. So it is definitely possible that I have doubts about someone or I have doubts about an individual. But what if I have a precedence for that? So if, for example, I get my wallet stolen and it's found with somebody, and then money gets stolen again, is it okay for me to have doubt about that person? Yeah, right. So having the doubt, there's nothing wrong with having that type of doubt. Why? Because that doubt actually has precedence. But doubting someone without any evidence, doubting someone without any proof, this is where it becomes extremely problematic, and this is where it becomes an issue. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is how Imam Ghazāli, he begins the section. He said, when Allah created animals, he made them prone to be corrupted and deadly due to two major reasons. He said there are internal factors and there are external factors, which he'll talk about and which he'll mention. But he also blessed them with those tools to prevent them from getting corrupted. So it's not that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala just gave these animals or gave us this ability to be corrupted or to be taken advantage of. He also gave us tools in order to help us channel these things and use them in a good way. So what are some of those internal reasons? He basically brings this out. And I think he took a lot of this from like Greek and Hellenistic discussions where they talk about heat and they talk about coldness and they talk, so they talk about the four natures of things. I don't know if you guys are familiar with any of those discussions. Yeah, it's not that important. But anyway, so basically there are humors that everybody has and there are natures that everyone has. And what he's done is he's kind of tied that here. So he said in every person, there's this moisture and there's this heat, and how these two things, they're constantly interacting with one another. They're constantly interacting with one another. But the important thing that he points out, he's like, this moisture is actually what feeds, is nourishment that provides the body. Meaning if there's too much heat, what does that do to the moisture? It dries it out, right? It evaporates it. And that has an effect on an individual's nourishment. So over here, is he talking about in a physical sense? In what sense is he talking about? Metaphorically, sure. But concerning what? Why is it so important to us in this discussion? Yeah. Where can this become an issue? So over here, if I get angry, is there a physical manifestation of this? Somebody who's constantly getting angry, what happens with them? Huh? I'm sorry? Right. So a lot of these people, sometimes they'll have physical heart issues, right? You know, they'll have heart issues, they'll have blood pressure issues. Many times they'll be more prone to sickness. Why is that? Why do they have a weaker immune system?
Not really.
Because cortisol is going on constantly.
Okay. I mean, those are all physical things that are happening to the person, but why is that happening? You know, why is the adrenaline? Why the cortisol? Why are all these different hormones pumping and working? Because of stress, right? So a person who's constantly in a state of anger, they're constantly putting pressure on themselves, they're putting pressure on their bodies, and this has a physical manifestation. But over here, what's more important to us? What's a more important discussion? We had said that there are different types of health. This type of health, what is Ghazāli talking about? Spiritual. He's talking about spiritual health. That this excessive anger, it actually affects what? The spirit. It actually affects the ruh. And this is the thing that is more important for us to control it for that reason than for physical reasons. Not to say that those physical reasons are wrong, but it's more important for us so that we look for our akhirah, so that we look for our afterlife and make sure that it is protected. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us. Dave, can you grab the iPad? I forgot. Yeah. So some of the external reasons that are mentioned. So he says here, again, with this metaphor of fire, he talks about this metaphor of fire. This fire is basically Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, from this fire, he created anger. And this anger then is something that he mixed in with man. So when he Azza wa Jal created mankind, one of the things that he inherently placed in them was this anger, right? He created and he put this anger into these individuals. So it is part of our being, right? It's part and parcel of who it is and who we are. This directly affects the heart. This is something that directly affects the heart. And what is unique about the heart is that it pumps blood where? Through our veins. And these veins reach where? Is there a place where it doesn't reach in our body? No, right? These veins, these arteries, they reach everywhere in the body. And what happens is when the heart is on fire, when the heart is angry, where does the anger go? It goes everywhere, not just everywhere. So this is what's really interesting. And I thought the metaphor here with fire was like much more apt and applicable. Is he said here that heat, what happens to heat? It rises. There you go. It goes to the head. He said, just like boiling water, right? So when you boil water, the steam rises. And then he's going to talk a little bit more about this and what happens when this anger rises, when this flame rises. It essentially is going to eventually affect what? Right? And what is there? And again, inshallah, we'll get to this and we'll talk about it. And he said anger can be directed to different people. So those people who are subordinate, whether they be your children, people who work under you, people who are younger than you, right? All of these people, how does anger usually manifest itself with those people? Right? You're actually able to what? You're actually able to express it, right? So that the anger comes out. The anger is able to come out because with those people who are subordinate, you're not fearing what? You're not fearing any repercussions. So you can fully manifest your anger toward these people and toward these individuals. And it just grows, right? So you will start from a part like a type of anger, and your anger can only grow from there. Again, because these individual subordinates, they do not have the same power to reciprocate against you. Hey, what about those who are above us? Like those people who are superiors, people who are elder to us? What happens with anger of those people? 3159. Now everybody knows. Yeah. I know, right? It's just yeah. Huh? Allahu Akbar. Yeah. So toward those above. Huh? It's a good question. Nice try. Huh? So what happens is, in this case of anger, is what's going to happen with this anger is going to be suppressed, right? It's going to be suppressed. Why? Because if this person retaliates against me, it can have major repercussions, right? There are major issues, there are major problems that can happen here. And what happens is all this anger, what happens to it? It shrinks, right? It not only does it shrink, it turns into sadness. Why? Because I can't actually express it. And those who are equal, what happens?
Oh, jealousy. Like,
So you have this anger, but just because this person is equal to me, is he going to be or she going to be equal to me in every way? No. And we had talked about this last time. What happens? What is one of the reasons that we are hesitant to express our anger to strangers?
you don't know them.
Because we don't not just we don't know them well, but what? Huh?
We don't know
The reaction. We don't know how they're going to react, right? So we don't know what to expect from strangers. And what happens is like it ends up going between this anger and the sadness because we don't really know how to gauge these individuals or these people who are equal to us. And that's why, again, so out of these three, you have two of them that still lead to frustration. And even in the first situation, is there an end to anger, right? Just because I'm able to express my anger, what is going to put it out? If we say it's like a fire, what is going to put that anger out? More anger? Huh? Okay. Well, and the question is, where does that water come from? Right? Because we had talked about this, like this idea of water, this idea that we're trying to create this internal balance between the moisture and the heat. How does that happen? And this is some of the things, inshallah, that he's going to talk about. So the place of anger is in the heart. And he says here that when the blood starts boiling, it immediately, the anger starts rising and it makes itself to the head. And the reason that this happens is for two. Either you're trying to prevent something from happening, or you're trying to retaliate. So it's either going to be prevention or retaliation that is causing this anger. And this is what is the thing that is actually making us upset. And he says here, when it comes to seeking out revenge, what happens to the individual is like they actually desire it. Right? A person becomes so angry that when they want to exact their anger, what happens? What's going on inside? Right? They revel in it, right? So it's like a negative feedback loop. I get angry and I want to see the person hurt. So I try to make the person hurt. And in that process, what's happening? I'm just getting angrier. Where does this really manifest itself in our day-to-day lives? Feminism, Allahu Akbar. Oh, families. So in families, it definitely happens a lot. It definitely happens a lot. And one of the ways, the worst ways that this actually manifests is in divorce. So when you what happens in divorce is that now the ex-husband and the ex-wife, what are they trying to do?
Get revenge on each other.
They're so busy trying to get revenge on each other. They're so busy trying to hurt each other that they do what? They're willing to do what?
Destroy their own self.
Not just destroy them our own selves, which is fine. You know what I mean? Like you want to go destroy yourself, go for it. But what happens? The kids. What happens is that these couples ends up using their kids as pawns to actually hurt their spouse. This is where it becomes extremely problematic. Because now it's not just about me. Now it's not just about you. I'm willing to use my children. And these are my kids, right? I'm willing to use my kids now to hurt my spouse. And why is that? Like all of these people were people that these individuals, at least theoretically, they loved. Yes. So at one point they loved their wife. At one point they loved their kids. What happened? Right here. This is what anger does. This is what rage does. And this is why that spite continues to be fueled. And who's an excellent example of somebody who's fueled by spite? The shaitan. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said about him that he's an enemy, that he's cursed, that he's a disbeliever. What would the shaitan need to do to undermine all of this? Just say La ilaha illallah, Muhammad Rasulullah. And make tawbah for what he did. And that would undermine our entire religion. How much spite must this individual have to know that and continue moving forward? It's just destructive, right? It's destructive. It's internally destructive. Like it's a fire that just keeps feeding itself. So there are types of people in regards to their anger. What types of people do you guys think exist? If I had to classify them according to their anger. Passive aggressive, okay. Huh?
Oh,
Aggressive.
Aggressive, okay, for sure. Passive aggressive would still be aggressive. Just the way they show it is different, that's all.
Like,
But aggressive for sure.
sort of,
Calm and angry. That's,
Okay, so people who are moderate. So I would say people who are aggressive, people who are moderate, and people who what? Huh? People who just don't get angry. So out of these three, which ones do you feel are problematic?
But don't get angry.
You think both of these are problematic?
yeah,
Okay,
you don't get angry at anything. It's like, you don't really stand for much.
okay,
If you
that's
see like
uh-huh.
injustice and you're like,
You're just
stuff
you're
like
indifferent.
that.
You're indifferent about it. Okay.
Just kind of like a.
Okay, so like I think that's like an extreme type of stoicism. What do you think about that? Okay. So if we have two stoic people, right? You have one stoic person who literally is not affected by anything. Right? They're seeing babies getting killed. They're just moving along their way. And then you have the other person who's stoic, who's also dealing, but the way they're channeling it and dealing with it internally is different. Right? Because you have people who express things differently. Yes. What's going on inside, you can have two of the same, like two different people, both of them externally are showing the same thing, but the challenges that each of them is facing is completely different. Does that make sense? So this person who is really internally indifferent, what do you feel about him? Huh?
It's a problem of mental.
Yeah.
Apathy.
Yeah, it's just complete apathy, right? You know, you're completely apathetic. You just don't care what's happening around you. Completely, like it's just unaffected. There are people, huh? It could, so usually like serial killers have that, right? Or people who are just going, or people who are in like a state of war. What happened? How do they view the enemy? They don't really care about it. Like they don't even view them as human. A lot of people like they'll ask, okay, what happened? You have the state of war. You have two sides that are fighting, and they're willing to commit these atrocities against one another. How? How can one human view another human in this way? Right, just desensitization. Like they're completely desensitized. And not just that, you have to view the other person as what? As an animal. No, literally, you have to view the other person as not human. This is what allows people, because once we remove that ethical filter that we had, it allows us to treat people however we want to treat them. And a lot of people ask, well, how can he do this, or how could she have done that? They've completely removed any type of feeling for the other person. The other person is not deserving of humanity. And may Allah protect us. So Angerless, he says this is a weakness, right? He definitely says this is a weakness. He said this person there's no passion in this person. There's nothing that actually ignites this person. There's nothing that will cause this person or bring this person forward to a cause or to stand up for anything, right? This person is completely apathetic. Even Imam Shafi'i, he said, whoever is incited and does not anger, then he's a donkey. In donkeys in Arab culture, they're looked at like as the dumbest animal. Like you really want to insult someone, you just call them a donkey. So and over here, he brings two ayat to prove his point. He says, وَالَّذِينَ مَعَهُ أَشِدَّاءَ عَلَى الْكُفَّارِ رُحَمَاء بَيْنَهُم. Those who follow him are harsh toward the disbelievers. And why? During war, showing this harshness, why are they showing it? Because they're fighting an enemy, and because of the atrocities that were committed, because of the injustices that are going on. These are the things that are inciting them. These are the things that are pushing them. They want to bring justice back. They want to stop these atrocities. If a person isn't passionate, how is that going to happen? Just imagine if they were all apathetic. There's no drive. There's no push. Even when you have wars that are on a standstill, right? When you have two sides of the battlefield, which is the side that usually wins? Right, the one that's more passionate, the one that wants that victory, because there's a cause that they believe in. And it doesn't mean they're always going to win, right? But yeah. Yes. Because it's not in general, like walking around just like, it's like, oh, It's like, you dirty kafir. Like, I mean, man, come on, man. This is like completely inappropriate. It's completely inappropriate. It's like if somebody has a flat tire and be like, oh yeah, like, you know what I mean? Like, let me give you one more. No, man, this is not, how is that inviting to Islam? Right? How is that inviting to Islam? This over here, even Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when he uses the word kafir, he uses it very purposely, right? These are people who are showing animosity. These are people who are actually fighting actively against Muslims. So it's important, again, to keep that context in mind. He Azza wa Jal, he said to the Prophet, Ya ayyuhan nabi, jahid al-kuffar wa al-munafiqin waghluz alayhim. That Prophet, strive against the disbelievers and the hypocrite and be tough with them. And you have to have that passion. You have to. Because without passion, there's nothing that is really going to drive an individual. So he says toughness and harshness, these are all signs of strength and passion, which again, they emanate from anger, right? The source of those are anger. And again, it could be that protective jealousy. It could be that jealousy for the love of something. You know, all of these are completely reasonable, and these should be part of our character. So one who is consumed by anger constantly, this individual, he loses sight, he loses insight, thought, rational choices, right? He just doesn't make good decisions because he's constantly angry. He's constantly upset. And there's a number of reasons for that, right? So in the argue that Ghazāli brings, is it nature or nurture? What do you guys think? It could be a combination of both. Are there people who are naturally angry? Right? They just have that temperament, right? Their temperament is to be angry, it is to be upset. Some people are nurtured like this. How can an individual be nurtured in anger? Huh? Abuse is possible, yes. What are you gonna say, Abdullah? Oh, the environment, like what? Okay, like depending on the neighborhood. Well, even within the neighborhood. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so if growing up, you see this in your family, you are more likely to be what? To be angry as well. Also, when we get older, do we or do we not choose our friends? Right? We choose our friends. And if I'm with those friends who are constantly angry and upset at the world, there's a very good chance that I'm always going to be angry and upset at the world too. So again, and he says the same thing, right? He says the same thing, that there is a natural argument to this, that there are people who have that temperament. There are people who do lean toward that. And that's something that it is very much a natural sense. And he said, but a mild temperament is the thing that can actually cool that. So if an individual does have, because all of this is a spectrum, right? When we look at anger, I would say that as long as you fall within the middle spectrum, you're okay. Because there's no line, right? There's no individual line that this is the balance point. It's important to make sure that we always try to fall within that window at the least. So what happens with this person is that he actually mixes with people who enjoy and they relish in this anger. And they talk about it and they brag about it. And this is something that many of us might not be unfamiliar with. When we talk to someone who's like, if I was there, right? Have we heard that? If I was there, I would have done this. Oh, I'm not going to take, I wouldn't take that. And look at how Ghazāli talks about that person. That this person, he is pushing this idea of positivity. And he says this is essentially ignorance. So this is essentially ignorance. It's extremely problematic for somebody to justify that. I wouldn't take that from anyone. Why not? You don't have any humility. Why? What's the problem? And we as Muslims don't let anyone cross boundaries with us. That's for sure. But is there like a one-time tolerance? Right? There has to be. There has to be. Why? Because we never gave them the boundaries. Does that make sense? Like there might be societal boundaries in place, in general. Like we shouldn't raise our voice, we shouldn't curse at someone, right? And these are things that we understand in society. But have I personally established that boundary with this person in front of me? No, I haven't. And because I haven't done that on a personal level, that one time I can what? I can let it go. I can allow it. That's part of humility. There is no situation where humility would not be allowed or where humility would not be praiseworthy. Now, if it happens a second time, there's going to be a problem. So he said this individual, what happens is like this fire, it's like a Kindle, right? And it just keeps burning inside him. It comes to a point where it's like smoke that covers his eyes. It's like smoke that covers his ears. It doesn't matter. And how many of us have tried speaking to someone where they're in a fit of rage? What happens? Huh? They turn on you, right? It's not just like, you might be their friend, right? You might be their friend. and be like, yo, dude, cool off. Like, who are you? Right? You know what I mean? Like all of a sudden that anger will just be turned toward you. Do they really intend that? Do they want to hurt you as their friend? No, but because they're so blinded, in their fit of rage, they are just this, it's like a wildfire, right? And whatever comes in its path, it's just going to destroy. And he brings the example of this anger like lighting a fire in a cave. And all of you have seen, maybe you've seen some movies where they make a fire because they go take refuge in a cave. Where do they make the fire? Inside the cave or on the outside? They make it outside. Why?
So it can be seen.
Well, not so much. Not just, well, oxygen is definitely a part of it. I agree. But why else? If I light a fire inside a cave, where's the smoke going to go? Right, it's just going to fill up the cave. And what's going to happen? Right, I'm going to suffocate. I'm not going to be able to see. I'm not. And this is a likeness that he brings. He said, when an individual gets angry, right, because it's all self-contained. It's all self-contained. And when that fire, I ignite that fire inside, all I'm doing is clouding my own judgment. All I'm doing is muting my own senses. And when I mute my own senses and when I cloud my judgment, I'm not going to make good decisions. I've had a number of cases where a man comes in, he's like, Sheikh, I was angry when I divorced my wife. I was like, who divorces their wife happily? Right? That doesn't make sense to me. And why are you using that as an excuse? I said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you an entire dictionary of words. I would disagree. Had you cursed her and you said all these things, I said, I would disagree. And I would say you were still wrong, but at least she's not what? At least she's not divorced. And seeking forgiveness for that sometimes is easier than taking back, especially if it's the third divorce. What are you going to do then? Huh? Yeah, and that's it. Oh, and a triple talaq, that's a different issue. But in general, man, it's very important for us to understand when to control our anger, especially and there's this sense of power that's associated with anger. Right? When an individual gets angry, he feels what? Or he feels powerful. Right? He feels powerful because it's fire that's burning inside. And it makes him feel like he can take on whatever challenge it is that's in front of him. And he can say things to hurt the person in front of him. And many times, why will men say the word divorce? Not just to hurt, right? It's a way to hurt their wife. And that's why they use it. Not for any other reason. It's just a way to flex and to show their power. And which is why men, but again, anybody, if you're thinking straight, you wouldn't what? You wouldn't do that. Even the rulings for divorce. When am I allowed to divorce my wife?
2 days a month.
No. Whoa. Wow. 2 days. Which days? Like Monday, like Monday, Thursday, or what? How's it work? No. I can only. There are two conditions. There are two conditions. Number one, I cannot have been intimate with her, and I have to wait for her cycle to end. Meaning that immediately if she comes off her cycle and a husband and wife are intimate, he has to wait almost an entire month before she is eligible to be divorced. Why? Why? To give time to cool off, to think. Be like, hey, is this the right decision? And is it fair to be intimate with a spouse and then divorce her? Right? This is emotional abuse, right? That's just using something. It's so wrong. There's a reason Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put these rules in place.
Would it be
No, it's called talaq bid'i. So in this situation, if somebody does, like if they divorce their wife while she's on her menstrual cycle or after being intimate with her, this is called talaq bid'i. It's a type of talaq that's innovatory. There's a difference of opinion on whether it applies or not, with most scholars saying it does apply.
It does?
Yes, it does apply. And in addition to the talaq being valid, he also has to make a special tawbah. He has to make a special istighfar for doing something that was haram. Because divorce in and of itself is what? Is halal, right? It's mubah. But he did it in a haram way. And this is where it becomes problematic.
So it does apply.
Yes.
Isn't there a hadith where it's like Qudsi that says that?
Yeah, أبغض الحلال عند الله الطلاق. Yani the most disliked or hated halal is talaq. A lot of scholars say it's weak.
That's weak.
Yeah. I mean, saying that is the meaning wrong? I don't think so. You know what I mean? But is it like actually a prophetic statement? Wallahu a'lam. I really, it's very contentious. So this fire, yeah. You have to repent because of the way you did it. You repent for the action.
Can you give an example
Sure.
of something that somebody did that they needed repenting for that still stood as what they did? If that makes sense? As a
Sure.
habit?
Stealing money from someone. Right?
But the person's still in harm. There's like a reflection there.
Still $10. Like, you know what I mean? $10 is not, how much does that have a lot of value in today's world?
Principle still, like as a
As a principle, I understand. I'm with you. But I'm saying, but at the end of the day, like, does $10 have like real value? It's not, I mean, yeah, it's like coffee, right? But I'm saying the point that I'm trying to make is like, sometimes there are certain things that it is very symbolic in how it's done. And it doesn't really have, even though it necessarily doesn't have a lot of value. Even though it doesn't have a lot of value in and of itself. But at that point, I mean, that does it mean it's not worthy of seeking repentance for, even though the value isn't there? Does that make sense? Yeah. And it's the same thing here. And the thing is, you're making tawbah for the action, not necessarily against the person, right? Because at the end of the day, the talaq is the right of the husband, right? If he chooses to divorce his wife, he can. But the way he did it was something that was completely unwarranted. And that's something you have to seek talaq for. Yes.
While we're on this topic,
Sure.
I've heard about the hadith of it being of
Yeah.
I've also heard about like there having to be like certain circumstances necessary. I never got to ask about that. Is that true?
No. Like, so a lot of people, they'll come up with all of these conditions on when you can divorce and when you can't divorce. It's like, okay, there was a woman, I forgot her name, but there was a companion basically who was married to this woman. They're both slaves. She was freed. So the Prophet ﷺ, he said to her, he's like, listen, you have a choice now. You want to stay married to him or not? And she was like, no. He followed her around Medina crying like, please take me back. The Prophet ﷺ went back to her and he was like, can you take him back? And you know what she said? She's like, are you ordering me or are you asking me? And he's like, I'm asking you. She's like, no, I don't want to be back with him. Why? He's not abusive. I don't have any problem with his religion. I just don't want to be with him. The only problem is, the only issue is the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He's talking about those women who seek divorce without reason, right? Because they think it's a game. That's the one where there's a curse on that woman who does that. That's where it's a problem. But if I've tried now. It's been 3 months. 6 months, a year, 2 years. I've tried living with this person and I can't. What do I do? You're not forced to be in that relationship. At the same time, it's important. Like, there's a balance with all these things. There are some people, like in modern culture, people have become very fickle, right? They've become very fickle, like a speck on my plate, divorce. You know, I mean, I can't live in this house. Like this is silly, right? This is absolutely, you've turned marriage into a game. And there are some people who will be like, oh, you know, for the kids, you know, it's like, okay, yeah, it's really good to raise kids, like watching their parents fight every day. What is their view of marriage going to be? Like, these are the two extremes, right? People who will not get divorced, abusive, you know what I mean? Like, not getting their rights. It doesn't matter. Like, no, marriage, we have to maintain it. And then you have some people extremely fickle, like over the smallest things, like, oh, I don't want to be in this marriage anymore. Both of these situations are extremely problematic. And the Prophet ﷺ specifically spoke about the fickle ones. And this one, he spoke about in terms of abuse, right? There are people who are taking their rights. You have a right to go to the hakim at that point. You have a right to go to a judge at that point and say, listen, I can't be in this marriage anymore. And it will be granted. Does that make sense? But in terms of taking steps on what to do, on how to reconcile, like, you know, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he lays down certain steps, right? So he's like, you know, if you fear high-handedness from your wife, what should you do? First, warn them, then you leave the bed, then you appoint someone, you know, to, then you strike them, right? This is part of the verse as well. And then you appoint someone to arbitrate. High-handedness. So different scholars explain it in different ways. I feel it's like, wallahu alam ya akhi, but I think the best way to actually represent and talk about it is disrespect. Like when there's respect lost between the spouses, and like if a wife is disrespectful toward her husband or a husband is disrespectful toward her wife, I think that's the best manifestation of what nushuz actually is in high-handedness.
I've heard like,
Yeah, because it's a unique word, right? And in nashaza, it just like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he uses it in different ways in the Quran. He uses it to mean like to clothe and to cover, but it's like there's a level of highness that's involved there, and that highness is like, you know, basically when you're looking down at your partner and you're looking down at your spouse.
Yeah, I see usually translated like rebellion.
So yeah, sure, but what does rebellious mean? You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's
Yeah. So like I said, I think disrespect is more I think it's more tangible in understanding what that is and what that means. So, those are the steps that are there. Is it an obligation for me to follow steps 1, 2, 3, 4? No, these are recommended by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it's not necessary. I can do whatever I feel it takes to kind of maintain the marriage if I feel it's worthy. You know what I mean? Like if I want to work to maintain it. And does it help? Many times it does, right? I mean, many times it does. Like if both spouses are trying to work, they're trying to make it work and they're trying to get back together. So they're going to try to follow and use these different techniques. And many times it works out. And sometimes guess what? It doesn't. What do you do? And that's it. You know, they might be two great people, but it's not necessary that they're great people together. Yeah, but and at the end of the day, don't be fickle. No? Don't be fickle, and don't hold on to something that is not deserving of being held on to. He also talks about anger, like the individual who's able to like navigate his anger is like a person who's on the high seas, right? So on the high seas, you're dealing with waves, you're dealing with wind, sometimes you're dealing with storms. And he says the captain of this boat is actually the heart. So the heart is the thing that actually brings balance and helps how to deal and how to navigate a lot of these issues, a lot of these problems. And it really goes back to the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that we had spoken about, that istafti qalbak, you know, ask your heart, return to your heart, walau aftak an-nas, even if people give you fatwa, even if people advise you, even people tell you to do things, at the end of the day, it's my heart that is supposed to guide me. And a lot of people are like, okay, well, doesn't our heart misguide us sometimes? Yeah, it does. There's no doubt. But even I know that when my heart is misguiding me, that my heart is misguiding me. It's tricky, right? It's tricky because sometimes our heart does deceive us, but many times even we will know that our heart is deceiving us. The question is, how honest are we with ourselves? And that true honesty is very challenging. It's really difficult to sit down and have a conversation with myself and determine like, hey, what I'm doing is wrong. I need to stop this. This is not fair. I need to correct this behavior, or I need to correct this relationship. I need to do something about it. So some signs of anger, I'm sure many of you are familiar with a lot of these, right? You know, the redness, or like your flaring nostrils, or, you know, some people's faces, they get contorted, you know, I mean, some people they'll scrunch up, and there are different ways that this manifests with people. And he closes with saying, like, if you actually saw yourself when you're angry, you'd be ashamed, right? You know, if you had the ability to actually look at yourself when you're angry, then you would not be happy with what you saw. So over here, you have the appearance of anger. It starts internally, and then it makes an appearance externally. And this has an effect on the body, for sure. And this is how it manifests itself. And he also says something really interesting, is that if a person is ugly inside, what's going to happen? Right? They become ugly outside, right? Even though they might appear beautiful or attractive or whatever the case might be. And how many of us have experienced this? Right? Somebody might be superficially beautiful or attractive. And in 5 seconds into the conversation, what happens? You become extremely unattractive. Like, you don't want to look at this person anymore. And I'm not talking in like necessarily like, you know, the sexual sense, but just in general, like, this is a good looking person. And the moment they walk in, they're like, oh my God, like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't want to be around this person. I don't want to be near this person. And this is the effect that these actions have. The next part is the effect on the tongue. So an individual who's constantly angry, what's going to happen? They're going to speak vile language. They're going to curse. Many times they'll say things that is not even understood, right? Sometimes people get so angry that you don't even understand what it is that they're saying. Sometimes they'll say things that are completely nonsensical. They'll continue to use inappropriate language, even if they're not cursing, right? They'll still use inappropriate language. And many times they'll use regretful language, right? They'll say something like with the divorce issue. How many men, after they say it, come back later and be like, oh man, I messed up. I shouldn't have said that. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. You shouldn't have. Like, I was really stupid. Allah protect us. Yeah.
Swearing, is that haram?
We had spoken about it before. It's in general, it's makruh. Anybody who indulges in it is definitely a sign of a diseased heart, though. Like, I can't say that it's haram. I can't say it's disliked, but anybody who indulges in it, like this, just a normal part of their speech, that's not someone you want to be around. Huh? No, I'm saying lahul hadith or whatever it is that you translate it as, or however you take it. At the end of the day, they're words, right? The only words that we are solely held accountable for are things that are clearly against the religion. By speaking about Allah, speaking about His Messenger, speaking about sha'air, Islam, speaking about those things that He Azza wa Jal has forbidden. These things are problematic, and there's clear sin that's associated with that. Making fun of the deen, but just what makes this word, what makes the F word different than and? They're both words.
Meaning.
And no, I mean, there is definitely a meaning that's there, but at the end of the day, they're words, right? And it's important for us to understand how, like, there's a big difference between directing those words toward people, right? And me stubbing my toe and saying, oh, right? There's a big difference there. Because one, I'm not directing the language toward anyone. So am I going to be sinning because I do that? Do you understand?
Yeah.
Versus even using it towards someone, it might not be the word that's problematic. What's going to be problematic is that person's how they felt. I hurt another Muslim, right? Or I hurt another person. And hurting the other person is where the accountability comes in. So, in fact, this should say limbs, I'm sorry. So, and when an individual is angry, what happens? They'll hit people, they'll assault people, they'll start tearing their own clothes, right? It leads to people killing one another. They hurt people with intention. And what happens is if you hurt someone with intention and you miss, what happens? You just get angrier, right? Like if you tried hitting someone and you miss them when you hit them, what happens? You end up trying to chase after them because your anger is just not satisfied, right? It's just not satisfied. And that anger continues feeding. It continues going, and there are a number of effects, right? So this person, they'll rip their own clothes, they'll lose consciousness, right? Some people just get so angry that they'll pass out. No, like people like Hulk Hogan, right? You know what I mean? Like he'll slap himself, like in the ground. You guys, who does it sound familiar? Like who does it sound like? It sounds like a child, right? It sounds like a child, but there's so many people who will actually resort to this. People will actually resort to this, right? They'll break the dinner table, right? Or they'll act as someone who's drunk or confused, huh? It depends on the dinner table, right? If it's from IKEA, it's probably not going to last. But like, or people who they become abusive toward inanimate objects, right? They'll start hurting animals, they'll start breaking things, right? They'll start hurting chairs, and sometimes they'll do it physically, sometimes they'll do it verbally, right? They'll start swearing at their car, like piece of car, you know what I mean? Like, and they'll just like start hitting the car and like kicking it and like. For those of you who've played video games and like throwing the controller at the TV, you know what I mean? Like this is a manifestation of anger. And if somebody was like an onlooker, they'd be like, what's wrong with this person? Like, what is it that's made you so angry that's causing you to do these things? So it's important, obviously to keep these things in line. I think we're out of time. It's almost time for Maghrib. But so what happens to the heart, right? So it leads to all of these other things, right? These are a lot of the evil thoughts that end up happening when an individual feeds their anger and they allow their anger to consume them. You ill will toward others. When you see somebody get hurt, you revel in it and you take happiness in that. Like all this stuff is evil. Like this stuff is like really, really bad. And for those of us that suffer from some of these characteristics, like these are things that we really need to work on. We really need to better ourselves. We should never take pleasure in somebody else's sadness. We should never take pleasure in somebody else's pain. It's not a sign of a healthy heart. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make all of our hearts healthy. So, but inshallah, we'll stop here and we'll continue bi'idhnillah from next week on the effects of anger and the different type of people of concerning it and how they deal with it. But are there any questions before we end today? Yes.
Sorry, I think there's something on your beard.
Yeah.
Maybe I probably got angry. No, it was a threat. It was a threat. Jazakallah. I know, right? Yeah, thank you. Should I get angry that nobody said anything? Any other questions? Comments? I might be traveling next week or for the next couple of weeks, but I'll keep you guys updated in the group, inshallah. Okay.
Will there just be no class then?
There won't be any class.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't feel like giving class on my vacation.
Well, I just thought that maybe someone looks like.
Have a substitute come in? You can wait. Okay. Yes. Yes. Yeah, it's going to be in the fall, inshallah. Yeah. I saw a few of you at the. I know you were there for the Quran one. I don't know if anybody else was there. How was it? It was good. Yeah. Okay. Alhamdulillah. No, I got a lot of complaints. Like I'm putting doubts into the hearts of the Muslims. Yeah. I was like, okay. No, it wasn't that. So, because the thing is, when it comes to the issue of like compilation in the Quran, it's important. There are a lot of mechanics that are there, right? It's not like, okay, the Prophet like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala went to Jibreel and he gave him a book and then he handed the Prophet a book and then this is what we have today. But that's not how it was brought to us.
There's 7
So you have the question of ahruf, you have the question of qira'at. After them, you have something called ikhtiyar, where you actually had scholars who read multiple readings and they would choose which one is the best one. Like dealing and reconciling with a lot of these things is not as straightforward as some people like to make it. So, but alhamdulillah, no, I'm glad you enjoyed. But I got 2 like very long messages.
Oh
Yeah.
See, weird contacting.
Yeah. No, I mean, and the thing is, I want that, right? It's like, it's important to have feedback, to understand, because even some of the people who reached out, I was like, okay, we can discuss some of these points that you're bringing up. I have no problem talking about it. But I mean, I had a good time. I don't know about everybody else. Also, I'll see you guys in a few weeks, inshallah. يلا والله أعلم صلى الله على خير خاتم نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. Huh? No. Not in the